Hi everyone, welcome to the Quantum Bridge. It's great that we've got a returning guests, Jasmine and Donal from Quantum Mogul. Welcome back, guys.
It's great to be
Great
here.
to be back.
Good stuff. Casper, what are we talking about today?
Well, hello guys, before I move on to that. Lovely to see you again. Yeah, so it was very recent. I don't know about the chronology in terms of how we'll put things out, but I imagine there'll be a prior one with these lovely guys from Quantum Mogul. But something that came up in our last conversation very, very quickly was that perhaps unfortunately at the moment, but it is the state of affairs, a limiting factor for a lot of the good people in the world who want to get involved in things like humanitarian projects, want to build their own businesses, want to just be a force for good, and certainly want to claim their own sovereignty and be able to operate more freely in the world. Money is still something that for many either is or feels like it prevents them from doing that and fulfilling what should be their life purpose, why they're actually here. So guys, thank you again for joining today. And I know that both of you are sort of understanding and involved in this area. Donal is particularly steeped in it. So if you'd like to start by any reintroductions you'd like to do is fine, of course, but actually just start touching on the topic of what is money and why do we find ourselves in this very precarious predicament?
Thank you very much, Red, and it's great to be back. And to get straight into it and to answer that question directly, the first thing we need to learn about money is that it's not money. It actually is currency. Now, this is not being picky with words. This is just a fact. There is a difference between currency and money. And this is something I would like to talk about today, because I think it is the first lesson that you need to learn about money to call it what it is. It is currency. So what is the difference? What is the difference between currency and what is money? There is only two things that can be classified as money in the world, and that is gold and silver. It is the reason, no matter what anybody says, that banks and countries all over the world for 5,000 years or more has held on to it and store it for a reason. Even though they come out and say it's a dead asset, if it's so dead, why are they holding it? So I am a complete advocate of gold and silver. Since the year 2000, 2001, I started buying silver, and 2002 or so, I started buying gold and have done it ever since. And I can certainly tell you it is not a bad investment. When I started buying it, it was $4 an ounce, $5 an ounce for silver. It's 25 today, 26. Was $250 an ounce for gold. It is $2,000 today. By any stretch of the imagination, that is a brilliant asset to have over a 21-year, 22-year period. That is a return that I am very happy with. So that's what money is. Now, what is currency? Currency is a medium of exchange. It is a thing that is created, I suppose, around 3,500 years ago. I think it was the Greeks that brought it out first. And it made it a simpler way than just trying to trade little bits of silver and little bits of gold and stuff that they couldn't really measure, and they didn't really know what weight it was. And I'll buy a head of cabbage if I have this little gram of gold. So currency was a great system to regularize things and to give it what they call fungibility. And what fungibility is that the £5 or $5 or €5 in your pocket is the same value as the $5, £5 and €5 in my pocket. So it had a good, it started like everything good. It started off with a good intention, but then of course it started to go wrong, because currency can be printed today at will, and gold and silver can't. Gold and silver has to be physically mined out of the ground. So it costs money and sweat and tears to get an ounce of gold out of the ground. And if anyone wants to really see the sweat and tears of it, they should watch the series Yukon Gold. It always blows me away. They move 100,000 ton of a mountain just to get a couple of hundred ounces of gold if they're lucky. That's not so with currency. Currency can be printed at will, and it is today being printed at will. And this is where people get caught, right, in this terrible rat race where they get caught with debts, which is driven by currency, and the currency is brought into the system through a debt system, and it's there before they know it, they're on the wheel that is just keeping them going around, right? And they're not getting anywhere, they're treading water, and then they start saving. They're told then they need to do pensions, they need to do savings, they need to do bonds, and what are they doing them on? They're saving them in currency, which is being devalued every day, right? When another 100 million or a billion is printed. So I just like to start off with that if you wanted to expand on that, right? But I wanted to be clear that this is the difference between money and currency, and this is the first place that people go wrong.
And I just wanted to jump in and say it's completely understandable that no one knows about it. Even people working in banks, even people I know in very high level positions in banking actually don't know how money is created or how the debt system operates. So I'm sure you'll have a lot more questions for
No,
Donal.
absolutely.
For the
Thank you for
listeners,
saying that.
if you don't know, you're not stupid. People
Yeah.
in the financial industry don't know either, which is really incredible to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you've touched on some incredibly key points there. Now, although I'm interested in this area, I don't pass myself off as being, a fount of any knowledge here. But what I would say is, guys, if you could touch on the area, this is wonderful that you've touched on money versus currency, and we've talked about the gold and silver backed, and of course we can talk about countries actually moving back to that as well, and the power play in the world. But just for people at the moment, probably in the Western Hemisphere, who still believe, however, that despite this difference between currency and money and so on, that when they're going into banks and they're putting money in banks and whatever, they believe they're putting money in banks and so on, and they're thinking that then the bank is now leveraging that and so on. But actually, almost everything, from my limited understanding, in our own financial, let's just call it for a moment, financial world in the Western Hemisphere, is based on debt. Mm-hmm. So rather than it being underpinned by anything, I mean, one, they're promissory notes anyway, but now they're promissory notes not backed by anything. They're figures on screens. So guys, particularly Donal, of course, if you could just maybe go into that a little bit more about what are we even being told money is at the moment? Obviously, it's being hidden as to exactly what it is and this whole thing of natural money, but even the messaging at the moment, what are we even meant to believe money is at the moment?
Well, we are being told, right? Again, right, if you don't mind, Casper, I'm going to call it currency, right?
Of course. No, of course.
I'm going to call it currency in the bank because it's not money. Yeah. So I'm going to call it currency and I'm going to stick to that, right? Because this makes a difference. And as you reflect out, it will make a difference. So what they're being told is, save this money in this account and we will give you 3%. We will give you 2%. And you will get the insurance company saying, wow, in a bad year like 2022, where we had high inflation, we still managed to make 4.8% gross. Now, 4.8% gross, first of all, is, depending on which country you live in, is probably around 2.5% net, 3% at the most. And then, of course, right, we have the fees and the management fees to manage it. Now, I'm not saying that the insurance company should work for free. I'm not saying that. But I would love if they just told the truth. Inflation was 35%, not 9%. Because if anyone goes to the pumps, right, they saw that fuel had gone up, right, by 35 to 40, 50%, depending on where you were. And some things done 100%, like steel and timber and more. So I would like if the CPI was honest. The consumer price index should be what it means, not the consumer price lie that they tell us, right? So it is the CP lie, not the CPI, right? And they should be able to tell us the truth. That they just say, why don't you come out and put all of the things in, like education, mortgages, schools, home heating and all that. Some of the things they pluck out of it to get this figure of 9%. And are you joking me? So show me, right, that it was 35 and then show me how you grossed 4.8. And then show me the net of that. And please show me how currency is winning the battle, because I don't see it. Now, on the other hand, right, show me gold and silver In 2019, right, especially gold, which was at around $1,400, and hit $2,000 for the first time ever in its history in August 2020. Please show me that, right, as well. And then I will make my decision, right? Then I will be explain what the difference of money and currency is. So what are we being told was your question. We are being told that it was okay to make 4.8% gross on a 35% inflation rate. That's what we're being told. And we just don't know how to decipher the information. We don't know how to process it because we're not taught to process it deliberately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you also, I think it's great if Donal can also go into, we don't really know how much that currency that we put into the bank from our paycheck in a savings account or whatever else it might be, how much that is actually leveraged.
Oh,
You
yeah.
mentioned something brilliant, Caspa, which is that it's not tied to something like gold or silver anymore. It's not a gold-backed currency anymore. Donal will go into that happening now again in a different economic bloc.
If we go back, right, to 1944, the end of the Second World War and the Bretton Woods Agreement, right? And we will see, right, for the first time in many decades or centuries, probably the British lost their sovereignty over the pound, and the US dollar became the dominant currency. Basically because why? They had 2/3 of the world's gold because they had financed the First World War and the Second World War, and Europe had paid for it in gold. So they had ended up with that amount of gold. They set up Fort Knox and the World Bank and the IMF and, surprise, surprise, NATO, all in the same year. Very convenient, wasn't it, right? The whole lot was set up in the same period of time, and there was a golden age from 1944, really, for about 30 years, 40 years in America, until, of course, Richard, and then the way they did it at that time is that they could only print, they had to have 40% of gold before they would print a dollar, or 2.5 to 1 to make it sense. So $2.5 it would be printed on 40% of the gold, right? So a very solid leveraging, nothing more than 2 or 3 to 1, very solid, very easy. But Charles de Gaulle, of course, in 1961 smelt a rat and knew damn well that the Americans, right, weren't keeping their word of the Bretton Woods Agreement, and sent his warships to New York. And we all know what happened there, which basically created a run on gold until 1971, until Richard Nixon had no choice but to take the whole world off the gold standard in the 15th, 16th of August, I think, 1971. And ever since, we have been operating in currency, just currency, like absolute worthless paper in the bank being printed into oblivion. And if you want to check any charts, and I would challenge anybody just to go onto any website and just download the monetary charts from the Federal Reserve or anything like that from 1950 to 2000, and you will see the curve starting in 1971 and all the ways. And of course, it goes crazy in 2008 crash and goes insane in 2020. And that's because, as you said at the beginning, it's figures on screens. It is just printed into existence. They don't even print it anymore. It's just figures into existence. And it's leveraged, God only knows. It could be 100 to 1. It could be 1,000. We don't know. It was supposed to be 10 to 1. God only knows at this stage. I think it is whatever they feel, because they're not telling us anything about it.
And the other thing about this, guys, and thank you for that, Donal, as well, that I think this all plays to lack of sovereignty. And a lot of what we're all doing here, not just Quantum Bridge, but I'm sure you guys as well, is about this self-empowerment, taking your power back, which is partly to do, of course, with taking your wealth back. And then there's this whole movement now away from, well, actually towards centralization of currency. And of course, we can talk about the centralization of digital currency as well, which is the next step. And at that point, you've lost any even pretense that this is now based on anything that it once was, i.e. it moved from money to currency to paper to screen-based numbers, right? And then it's going to move to something that might involve all sorts of strange contracts and so on that are so divorced from what people have as a concept, I believe at least, of money. that you're in a totally different world at that point. It's totally moved on, and where it feels at the moment like there might still be the potential to put the brakes on this system, right? Probably not, but it feels like with this where we're going that the horse has literally bolted at that point.
It reminds me like of the Titanic. But when they saw the iceberg, at least they started to turn away from it. We seem to have put the throttle down and said, we'll go through it.
Yeah.
You know? So, the sad thing about a debt-based society is it steals the wealth from under our noses, from us,
And
our
future.
children,
Yeah.
and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It just steals it right from under your noses, because when $1 billion or $10 billion is issued, it's issued in the form of a bond through a treasury note, which is exchanged, which drives the stock market up falsely, which we saw in 2020. It did it. Because that's where all the money came in and almost took Jeff Bezos to a trillionaire. And it isn't that I didn't mind Jeff Bezos being a trillionaire. That's not the point I'm making. It rose Amazon to a fake price that it shouldn't have been. What happened right when the world opened? The tech stocks dropped right. So because you're stealing wealth and giving it to the richest people on earth, which is completely such a negative side of currency debt-based society when it's out of control. And I don't mind it at 2.5, 3 to 1, or maybe 4 to 1, but at this insanity at 100 to 1 and possibly more, it is ridiculous, and now it's imploding on themselves. It's taking down the banks now. So they've
Like
actually,
SVB and everything.
they've actually managed to take themselves down. Credit Suisse.
The worrying thing about that, and I'm sure there's people out there that will feel that this is part of a plan, because as the banks go, that gives the perfect segue and excuse to say the banks have failed. We have to give you something now that can never fail. Oh, waiting in the wings, you've got this centralized digital currency.
That's correct.
Exactly.
I agree with you 100%. I do not think it's an accident. And I do not think that what happened in 2008 is an accident. And it goes right back to Bill Clinton's stuff, the law he passed, I think, in 1994, when they changed the mortgage laws, that they dropped the level that people could get in to take mortgages, and people started to get mortgages that should never have got mortgages, and ended upright with mortgages that were crap. And of course, then if anyone watched the movie The Big Short, you would see what happened. These tranche of mortgages were put together, the good, the bad, and the ugly, sold into the market and created a bomb that absolutely caused 2008. And what did we do in 2008? Only paper over it. And now, right, if anyone watches The Big Short, you hear them talking about 4 billion, 5 billion, and you listen today, right, you hear them talking 4 trillion, 5 trillion. You think, right, what were they complaining about with The Big Short, right? but 4 billion, 5 billion was big money that time. And that was just 15, 16 years ago. And
also, I think when it gets into the trillions, there's part of this that to make it so abstract that you literally can't get any sort of handle on it anymore. It feels like look, I'm noticing that the time's ticking down. I think this is at least a 2-parter, if you don't mind, guys, because I think, again, we've more than scratched the surface, but I think we need a bit more time.
Can I just finish with
of course.
Yes, we have opened up now the can of worms, right? And I know that any of our listeners are saying, okay, well, what do we do about it, right? So this is where we will have in the next part, we will be talking about solutions, right? About like awareness, right? Okay, if people don't like education, fine. Education or awareness. There is a way to protect yourself against it. And of course, again, for me, it goes back to gold and silver, but we will talk about that in the next episode. And it's so that we're not here, people, as some people say, well, you're stating the bleeding obvious. Or what are we going to do about it, right? Okay, well, we'll talk about that in the next episode.
As well as the power of intentional investing. What is value for you? How does money actually get to work for you, and why is it important for you? So what is aligned wealth? We'll also cover
absolutely, Jasmine. I think that area of value and wealth, and we're going to touch on maybe a bit more about the currency aspect of things and where that's heading. And I think then, as part of that, wrapping up the second one, we should look at that area of what actually is true wealth, and certainly what's a way of protecting not only your wealth but legacy wealth. So I'd love to do that again.
Perfect.
Thank you
Perfect.
so
We'd love
much,
to do that.
Casper and Gary. We'd love it.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. For now, guys, thank you both very much indeed again.
No problem.
Bye for now.
You're welcome.